Hi everyone, it's Monica, and welcome back to Tailor-Made Cards for You. Well, today I'm sharing with you the Christmas postal stamps, and this is a stamp set that I have been eyeing for the past several Christmases. I have the original one, which doesn't have the Christmas post stamps. It has just the regular postmarks, but I was able to actually get this one on sale because it's been out for a few years now. And I was kind of excited to play with it because they have a lot of really great ones that aren't in the original set. Now, I also picked up the mail art because I kind of think these two go hand in hand. And when we think about mail art, a lot of times we just think about envelopes, but you can do so much more with these stamps. And this is really what I wanted to share with you today. Now, I created these little pouches and I decorated them. And I've added ephemera in them, and these are actually in my shop over at tailormadecardsforyou.com. Now, in my pack, there's lots of ephemera, and these are little packs just to kind of get you started on your crafting. As you see, you're going to have a lot of items in here, and they're vintage items as well as reproduced vintage, and some of them are stickers. And as you can see, this little Santa here with this little kid is one of the stickers that I created. Now, not only do I love Tim Holtz's stamps, of course they inspire me because they're vintage inspired, but I also love working with other stamps. And this stamp is just a regular office stamp that has a date. And it's really fun because I can use it for some of my creations if I were to create a birthday card or even like you see here, December 25th. But I want to take it a step further. Not only do I like to use the stamps that you can buy in all the shops, but I love to collect these old XStamper office stamps. And if you're lucky, you can get some really nice ones that have lots of ink. And even if they don't have a lot of ink, you can always add ink to them. Now, I was fortunate enough to get my hands on a lot of these stamps. And I am a junker. I do seek out vintage items all over the place. And when I found someone that had hundreds of these stamps, I grabbed them up because I wanted to add them in my shop. And they're going to be available, like I said, and I'll leave links below so you can check it out. But these are great for your envelope designs. And you can use them not only, like I said, for envelope designs, but you can also use them for backgrounds on your cards. And that's really what I want to show you today. I also wanted to share with you another product that I just tried out. And I saw somebody else use it. And this is called Vintage Mod Podge. I know a lot of us are familiar with the Mod Podge, but this is a product that I just recently picked up and I wanted to give it a try. So this is what we're going to create today. As you can see, I have some of those postal marks in the background, and then I used some of that ephemera in those packs to create this little card. And I am using the postage stamp die. I know that I linked this up to some of my Halloween videos, and I apologize because it looks like scrapbook.com isn't carrying it anymore, but I will link up to another die set that will work great for these types of designs. Postage stamps are probably one of my favorite types of die cuts, and I love how you can get stackable ones with different sizes. So I made sure that I found another die for you, and I'll link it up again in the products below. So the first thing you're going to want to do, of course, is die cut your paper, and you're going to want to use your postage die. Now, I use the big die cut because I'm going to go ahead and frame it, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to do some stamping here. Now, we're going to be using a combination of Tim Holtz's postage stamps as well as some of my vintage stamps. And as you can see here, my Misty is a little bit wobbly and I couldn't figure out why. And then I figured out one of those stinking little magnets was stuck to the bottom of my Misty. I'm sure we've all experienced this before, and I went ahead and I left it in my video because I thought it was really funny. But yes, we all have these little faux pas that go on when we're crafting, and I am no different. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and pick out some of these background Christmas stamps. And it's important that you kind of place it before you actually stamp down. You're not going to want to stamp one at a time, of course. You can easily just place these using your Misty, and then you can stamp them all at the same time. Now, not to say you couldn't stamp them individually. You certainly don't have to use your Misty or your stamping platform, whichever you have. But it sure makes it a lot easier. And don't be afraid to place your stamps, even if you think they're going to get covered with some of your ephemera. That really is the point of a background, is you don't want it to be too perfect. You want it to be organic. So just place the backgrounds as you like them. Don't think about where you're going to be putting some of your ephemera, unless you really want one of the stamps to show. Then you might have to give it a little bit of thought. But I just kind of randomly picked some of my stamps and I just put them all over the background. Now, in my original design, I used black ink, and I thought it looked fine, but I really wanted to have more of a brown tone, so I decided to use my brown ink from scrapbook.com. And if you haven't used any of the inks from scrapbook.com, they really are good. They're nice and juicy, and you get really clear impressions. I have this dark chocolate, and it was perfect for my vintage-inspired background. So once I had all of my stamps placed, I went ahead and I just took my ink, and I was generous about adding the ink to my stamps. And it did take a few stamps, a few inky stamps to go ahead and get nice placement. And I do apologize about that light right in the middle of my screen. That is my overhead light, and I've had to tape some of these videos at night, so I do apologize, but you're only going to see that glare when I'm working with my Misty. So once I have all of my stamps inked up and stamped nicely, then I'm ready to go ahead and add some of my antique linen to the background. Now remember, I'm making a vintage inspired card, so I do want it to look a little bit aged, and the antique linen was great for this. Now, I know a lot of us like to create the same type of card during the holidays, and this design is perfect for mass production. Once you get your stamps in place, it's just a matter of just continuing to ink up your stamps and stamp them. You can easily cut out several of your postage dies and then just kind of line them up and stamp away. This design is very easy, and it doesn't take a lot of time to put it together. So if you are looking to mass produce, this is a really good design for that. Now I did decide to stamp out several of my backgrounds because I wanted to create several cards as well. I think this design is really cute, and I'm certainly going to use it for some of my cards that I send out as well. Now, one thing that I mentioned earlier is using a date stamp, and I really like to date stamp my Christmas cards. I know a lot of my family members keep my cards, probably because they love me, not necessarily because it's the most beautiful card in the world, but I know that they keep the cards that I create for them, and I really think it's special when you have a date on it. And some of my family actually use some of my cards to go on their tree too. I think that's a really cute idea. And then you'll have the date stamp right on your card that they'll be able to look back and know exactly what year it was given to them. Okay, so once I have all of my stamping done, then I want to go ahead and antique up my card, so to speak. And I'm going to be using some inks from Tim Holtz. I'm going to use Antique Linen, which is one of the distress inks. And I want to say that I used the regular ink. I didn't actually use the oxide. The oxide is great for stamping, but of course you always want to go back to your roots. And I decided to just use the regular distress ink from Tim Holtz. And again, this is the Antique Linen. And I am using one of my brushes that I got from Picket Fence, I believe. And I really like this brush as well. I know a lot of us probably have this brush by now. And it is so nice to be able to hold it in my hand like I'm doing right now and be able to add some of the color. And because I was looking for it to be a little bit imperfect, I wasn't too concerned about some of the ink being darker on some places. I was looking to age it. So having it darker on some parts of it was completely fine for me. And then for my edges, I always use Walnut stain. This really is just my go-to ink for edging my cards. Antique Linen, excuse me, not Antique Linen, but Vintage Photo is also a really good one. But I tend to go to the darker one. I just really like Walnut stain. And this is probably one of my most used colors next to Black Soot. Okay, so with the background complete now, it was time to go ahead and add some borders to my card. You'll find when you do die cut your postage stamp, it is a little bit small, so you want to probably add some sort of colored border to the background. And for my cards, I decided to use craft just because I am, again, going with the brown tones on my card, and the craft cardstock is perfect for this. Now, one thing that I find really interesting is even when I'm using my paper cutter, sometimes I get my paper uneven, but I've found a way to make sure that it is going to be even with my image that I'm working with. So what I'll typically do is I'll just get some sort of adhesive and I'll add my stamped background to my paper, and then I'm going to actually use the paper trimmer to line up my edge. So I just am using some of my favorite glue, which has become my favorite adhesive, guys. I cannot talk up this glue enough. I know that in a lot of my old videos, I would use my pink ATG gun, but I am loving this glue. So I'm going to link it below, and I don't typically say that you need to go out and buy something, but this glue is great, especially if you make journals. And I originally bought it for my journals, but I started using it on my cardstock, and I love it because it gives me the chance to move it around, and I can make sure that my paper is lined up perfectly. All right, so once I have my adhesive down, you'll see I'm using the actual plastic bar as my grid or my line to make sure that I have it lined up. So I just make sure that my white background is lined up with the edge of that plastic bar, and it gives me just enough border for my card, and it's even. So I don't have to worry about pre-cutting it and then trying to line it up on my cardstock. I go ahead and I just adhere it first, and then I cut it after the fact. Okay, so now that I have a perfectly aligned border, I'm going to go ahead and start adding some of my images. Now, of course, you know, I'm going to use the images from my little ephemera pack because I think they're really cute. But Tim Holtz also has some great ephemera as well, and I'll link up both. So if you see some images here that you like, my paper pack is going to be available in my shop, and it's going to be jam-packed. So it's a really good value. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just kind of figure out exactly what I want to do here. And this is an opportunity for me to also just share with you some of the items in this paper pack. You've got special delivery, you've got parcel post, and what I love about this is there's a lot of reds. So it makes a really great background for, or complements, I should say, the background that I created. Just the red and the brown tones just work really nicely together. Okay, so ultimately I decided to go with this Jolly Santa here. And in my paper pack, these little images are stickers, which makes it really nice. So you don't have to necessarily use adhesive. I wanted to make it easy when we're putting the cards together. So I did turn these into stickers. So all you have to do is peel off the back and place down that Santa, and you're really good to go. Now, in the beginning of the video, I told you that I'm trying out a new product, so I wanted to share that with you as well. And this is, like I said, the vintage Mod Podge. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with it, but I definitely wanted to give it a try. In the past, when I've wanted to try to antique my cards up, I'll use my collage medium from Tim Holtz, and the vintage collage medium is great. I love it. But it comes in the smaller bottles, and I really wanted to try to get more for my money. And this is when I decided to try the vintage Mod Podge. So the Mod Podge works like decoupage. So if you've ever done any decoupaging or collaging, that's kind of what it is. It's a sealant that you can put over your ephemera, and even you can use it as an adhesive. But a lot of times I'll adhere my paper first, and then I'll just use the collage medium, or in this case the Mod Podge, over my images, because it adds not only a nice sealant, but it also gives it a nice vintage tone. So I really wanted to check it out and see if this is going to be something that I can use. Now, when I went searching out the Mod Podge, I went to my Hobby Lobby because typically I can find a lot of my items there. But I wasn't able to find this particular Mod Podge there, so I did have to go online. But again, I'll link it below, so if you do want to check out this product, you'll be able to find it without having to search all over the place. And then once I've got my stickers adhered, then I'm going to be adding some more tone. I'm going to add some more of that antique linen to go over my Santa, and then I'm going to be adding that Mod Podge as well. Now, you want your paper to look organic. You don't necessarily want it to look too placed. So that's where I said don't put too much thought about trying to keep those stamped images visible. Think about the finished product. Think about the finished card. And so you're going to want your Santa and your special delivery to be placed so that way they will stand out in the card. The stamps are the background, and that's really the intention, is just to have the background. They're not the focal point, so don't get too hung up on that. Now, when you're using your Mod Podge, you can adhere it a couple of ways. You can certainly just stick your finger right into the container and then rub it all over your images. But I'm going to use a paintbrush for this because I wanted to not necessarily get my fingers all dirty. In the past, when I have used Mod Podge, of course, I have just stuck it right in, my fingers right in, and then moved it around my images. But I'm going to go ahead and just use one of my water brushes. And I'm going to make sure I get some nice even tones all over my images. Now, one thing I have to warn you is if you are going to use one of your paint brushes, make sure that you clean it right after you use it, because once this Mod Podge dries on your tools, it is going to be really hard to get off. So just kind of keep that in mind. So I was really generous about using this Mod Podge because, again, I wanted to have some vintage tones on my card. And for the most part, it did give it some tones. If you want to have it darker, of course, you're going to have to put a few layers. But if I have to compare it to Tim Holtz's, his vintage collage medium is definitely a little bit darker. But what I like about this Mod Podge is it does still give me some of that vintage tone, and you get a lot more of it. So the price point is a little bit better there. Maybe do a combination, but I think it's definitely worth checking out. Okay, so once I was finished with the card, I did want to add one more layer to the background because when I actually sized it up on my A2 card, it was still a little bit small. So I am going to go ahead and find some designer paper to add to the background. And I really think any type of designer paper would work. You can certainly go with the red tones or the brown tones. But at this point, since it is going to be just a really small border, I think you would be safe to use any type of designer paper. And I really had a lot of fun creating this card. I have to say, collages are probably some of my favorite types of cards to create. I know a lot of us like to stamp, and I do as well, but I really like working with ephemera. I like placing it, and I like to create a little scene, and I think it's a really fun way to create Christmas cards. You could even do this with some of your kids because you don't necessarily have to be a skilled stamper. It's just a matter of placing your stickers on a card. So if you were to get the ephemera pack and the little stickers, this is something that you could put together with your kids, and I'm sure they would have a lot of fun with the stickers. So that pretty much does it for my second day of my 12 days of Christmas. I hope that you've enjoyed my process in putting together this cute little Christmas card. And I'm going to show you in just a minute here how I created a few more because I just had so much fun putting together these cards for you. Now don't forget, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, don't forget to hit that subscribe button before you head out. And there is a little bell that will notify you when my next video comes up, which will be the day after tomorrow. Now, if you've enjoyed my video, please leave a thumbs up. And also, I would love it if you would share my video as well. The more the merrier. Also, on my series, I do giveaways, so please leave a comment. Let me know what you thought about these cards. And you can leave that in the comments below, and I will use those for my drawing. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for stopping by, and we'll see you again in a couple days.